and welcome to Faultlines. I'm your host Shahzad Raza. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has reaffirmed his commitment of economic turnaround through reforms, structural changes and ensuring merit in every public sector department. Pakistan has already taken a number of steps under the IMF agreement. Not long ago, the country was on the verge of economic collapse, not anymore. How this take-off stage, as they call it, would translate in the months and years to come, and what steps are needed to be taken to keep this momentum going. To discuss this, we have with us in the studio Zafar Durrani. He is an entrepreneur, businessman, president of Reenergia, and of course the economic expert. Thank you so much, Zafar Durrani sir, for your time. Dr. Jasim Anwar, he's a development economist. He's also with us on the video link. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for your time as well. And very soon we'll have Mehtab Haider and Waheed with us as well. Ahmed Durrani sir, the government has taken a number of steps. You have time and again talked about it, but now the economists, the people like you, the business community, they are urging the government to keep a focus on the fiscal reforms, or they call it tightening the belt, or cutting the size of the government, reduce the expenses or expenditure. So first I would like you to briefly define this fiscal discipline, and secondly, is the government on the right track to achieve these targets?
Well, thank you very much, Shahzad. It's a pleasure being back on your program. But look, defining fiscal discipline is not that difficult. It's basically the government cutting its size and its
That's it.
Really
Is it that simple?
Well, I mean, the definition is simple, but the implementation is very, very difficult. And one of the things that I think comes in between is the fact that the government is very rigid. Right? It's not, I mean, as much as we think that the private sector is rigid, actually the government as far as labor goes, so let's assume that, and within that government structure, I'll put three definitions. The first definition is within the federal structure. So, we still see within the federal structure two parts. One is the standard government, which is the, the functioning government, the regulators, the service delivery. Well, service delivery is actually part of the provinces. But essentially, when you look at that, then you have the state-owned enterprises. So as you saw, the state-owned enterprises, now their deficits, which we used to talk about 3 years ago in like $500 billion, are now combined, going up into multiples of trillions. These state-owned enterprises can be as big as our dear friends, the railways, and bigger than that, PIA, etc. And many privatization attempts, and then can be as little as some little thing that deals with agriculture. I won't name names, but bottom line is these are fixed expenses, and they are in a way off the budget, but still part of the fiscal belt tightening program of the government. So, this thing about SOEs, and one of our friends, Dr. Istiqbal Mehdi, has been at it for 30 years. He's probably the single expert on SOE and what. So that's at the federal level. Then if you go down to the provincial level takes more from the federation, gives back very little, has very little tax effort, right? So in other words, then the province keeps ballooning. So I'm going to not talk about the provinces because we're sitting in the federal capital, so let's keep it there. So let's talk just on the federal budget, right? So on the federal budget, as part of the belt tightening, one of the things that we see happening, and I was very happy to hear from the Prime Minister yesterday at Udan, Pakistan, that actually, he's talking very much about, efficiency of performance. But yet at the same time, they've advertised for 3 tiers of people in the ministry from the private sector who will probably get, very high pay scales, etc. And yet he says he wants to improve governance, and at the same time, in the same breath, because somebody in the bureaucracy has said, no, the bureaucrat's going to stay. So the secretaries are going to stay when you are going to have a principal accounting officer separately, etc., etc. So fiscal tightening is not, the problem is when I talk about fiscal tightening, let me talk about one other part of the fiscal tightening. This is what we spent on development, because as a federal government, the services are the provinces, right? So when we talk about, the federation regulates, right? For example, telcos, this, that, etc., weather, meteorology, research, this kind of stuff. And of course, our dear old armed forces. So end of the day, when you really start talking of fiscal tightening, what so far has been done or used to get done was people used to only tighten the development budget, which in simple vernacular, I think now almost everybody in Pakistan is called the public sector development program. So they keep cutting it, they spend very little of it, and the whole inefficiency is born out of this other part, which is the recurrent budget, right?
But there is a question. If the private sector is providing enough job to the people, because these state-owned enterprises, they are not incurring losses because of the electricity or power bills they have to pay every month, but also they are providing hundreds and thousands of jobs to the people. Fine. The government should not be doing business. I mean, it's not the government's job. You just mentioned that government's job, primarily the government's job is to regulate. But in the developed countries, if the government is regulating on merit, but on the other hand the private sector is filling the space, it's providing the enough job to the people. So here the government also have a political compulsion as well, don't you think?
No, I think the private sector is not really providing enough jobs to the people. So the problem with the private sector, and this is
that's what I'm saying, that's a pressure on the government, don't you think?
That is a pressure, and that pressure, there are two ways to release it. One is to fix the private sector, give them more opportunities. So it can't happen like in Arabic they say kun fayakun, let there be light. Yeah, he said and it was done. So bottom line is that end of the day the government has to have some staying power, right? They have to give a 2-3 year transition period. Let's take defense sector for example. Let's take any sector, pick up energy, pick up anyone. Most of the jobs and enterprises are in the hands of the government, right? Barring some gencos, etc. So bottom line is, when you go, if they are even in manufacturing, the government is in every sector of the space. So the three things that they do wrong, well actually I'll only highlight two to save time. One, let's say they're competing with the private sector. So when you compete with the government and the government's a regulator, it's kind of incestuous, right? You provide service and you regulate yourself, so out. Second, the government sits on and seeks rent on, and the rent seeking. I think the Prime Minister was very clear on this. He gave one example of the Federal Bureau of Revenue yesterday, which I think everyone saw, and he gave it in English. And he did switch to Urdu on the Safarish part, but he basically, everyone wants to have a government job. The other day, and this is not recent year, but just last year somewhere, at jobs between grade 1 and 5 opened for the government. Do you know how many applicants? 3 million applicants went after those jobs. Sorry, 350,000 applicants went after that job. What's in a grade 1 to 5 job? There's got to be something, right? It's got to be seen as something which is prestigious. It's got to be seen as something where you can get off without working. So there goes your efficiency out of the window. And third, it's a rent-seeking seat. And I think the Prime Minister knows this, and he mentioned this in Iran, Pakistan yesterday.
Very right, very. Dr. Jasim Anwar Sahab, you've been part of the government for a long time and following and closely monitoring the government financial policies. The question is, Mr. Haider Durrani just mentioned that, of course, when the government comes in, it has to take some time and to implement its policies, or first, to develop some policies. So first, the direction. You think the direction or the focus of the government is on the right path, number one, and number two, when we talk about cutting the size of the government, bringing more reforms, ensuring fiscal discipline. So in general, in the country like Pakistan, how much time would it take? Because time and again we try to cut the size of the government through the privatization process, but the kind of response the government was looking for in the past wasn't there from the private sector. So don't you think that it's not only the responsibility of the government, but also the private sector to step in?
Yes, Shahzad, thank you so much, and glad to see you after a while. Well, you asked two different dimensions. One is, what were the reforms done, and are we on the right track? And then what are the other collateral and other parallel initiatives that further strengthen the fiscal discipline in this country? So number one, if you recall, 2-3 years ago, very extensive planning were done. And then later on, when the new government took place, Udan Pakistan was launched, and using the 5E framework of national economic transformation. All those 5Es has its own policy guidelines and strategic initiatives that government started to implement over the period of time. Evidence that shows the success of these is clearly evident by the international trust and the economic growth that we see in the shape of macro and economic stability. You have seen the inflation dropped from somewhere around 30 to back around 4 to 5%. You have seen that the dollar to rupee parity and the currency stabilization was very much clearly evident in last 2 years. You have seen that international interest in investment in Pakistan was clearly emerging. The remittances, the FDI has substantially increased over last 2 years. A number of bilateral and multilateral MOUs and agreement was signed between Middle Eastern countries, Central Asian states, in China, as well as in Far East, as well as with some US entities. This clearly speaks that the directions that were set and the policy reforms that were taken in 5 sectors, starting from the export up to the knowledge economy, including this environment, sustainability, and the building the human capital, they're all in the right direction. Now, what are the further fine tuning required, and what are the key principles that basically drives the economy are embedded in the Prime Minister Udan Pakistan program? Uh, my colleague was talking about governance reforms, yes, improving efficiency and fiscal discipline. So the prime parameter in the fiscal efficiency is the e-governance system. Uh, so far, almost 99% of the departments within the ministries in the federal state, they are converted into the e-filing system. In addition, the bidding process and the procurement process has been completely transformed from the manual to the electronic process, which is available online, reports are available, and all the international investors and the bidders can monitor and see the transparency involved in all these processes.
But Dr. Jassim, we talk a lot about the government and what government has to do or what it shouldn't do. But the question is, where is the private sector in the entire equation? I mean, of course, in a democracy, you should hold the government accountable. You should ask the government the right questions, whether they are taking the country to the right direction. But on the other hand, when private sector is doing business in the same country under this constitution or the law, so obviously the private questions must be asked to the private sector as well. I mean, from tax evasion to other malpractices. I mean, there are several examples. I'm not criticizing each and every one, but there are examples of such gross misconduct from the private sector. But what role it has to play, and is it playing the due role or no?
I definitely, I was coming to that point. Shahzad, the 5E framework has its punchline that the government should reduce its footprint in the service delivery and encourage the private sector to come forward and participate in the service provision and industries and value addition and number of other, services that can drive the economy. So there's no question that the private sector is and can contribute significantly to the economy. Now, the question comes, what is the right now contribution, how it can enhance, and how each private sector and each individual, regardless of whether he is in service sector or private sector or government sector, can contribute. So all the business sectors, including my colleagues, which will be joining in this program, they want ease of business, one window operations for opening their businesses across the world, providing a platform where they can import and export through without any difficulty. Uh, this is being done, and the number of companies are enjoying these benefits, especially the export-oriented businesses have SROs that also provide support. Now, coming to the development budget, which my colleague was mentioning, and its contribution in the shape of the federal taxes as well as the provincial contributions. So from this year, even from the last year, and you look at the historical trends, the contribution by the services sector in the provinces is negligible compared to the federal contributions that the federal government is collecting from the provinces and also giving back to the provinces for their development. This is a big gap, and this gap basically relies in the retail sector. Somehow the importers or the industrial sectors, they are covered at source taxation, similar the service sector.
Dr. Saab, I'm sorry to cut you, but we'll talk about the tax reforms and the process of taxation in the second half of the program. But right now, Mehtab Haider, he's a senior journalist, is joining us on the telephone line. Thank you very much, Mehtab. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
All right. We are discussing the fiscal discipline and the government efforts to cut the size of its operations. The question is, one solution is to privatize the state-owned enterprises or the loss-making entities. But recently we saw that the privatization process of Pakistan International Airline hit snags. The government could not get, the desired bid it was looking for, but again, the PIA in a very short time would be again for the privatization. And do you think that this time the government would get what it is expecting from the successful or potential bidders?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much for having me. Actually, the question raised is very relevant. But before answering your question, I want to say something about the discussion which were you incurring a little bit earlier. Actually, it is the job of the government to provide policies. To provide policy formulation is the basic responsibility of the government, and as well as providing the regulations for all the sectors. But there is a thin line, and there is a need to differentiate between the two. The government should be not the pro-businesses, but the pro-market. It is the job of the government to provide a level playing field for the private sector to play its role. So this is the missing link, and I think there is a need to deliberate further. On your privatization part, I think there should be clarity that it is not job of the government to do the business. The government should provide an enabling.
Time and again we heard federal finance minister talking about it, ensuring that the government would not be doing business anymore. But it's a gradual process because the size of the state-owned enterprises.
Of course, but the footprint of the government in the past has increased manifold. On one side, the government is saying that now the time has come when they are all set to decrease its footprint. But on the other side, we can see that there are still some more institutions and departments are in the offing. There is a need to bring clarity. It is not the job of the government to provide jobs or to provide to establish so many institutions. It is the job of the private sector, but the private sector role, it needs to deliberate further. For instance, when we are under the IMF program, there is so much taxation. There is a burden of taxation. The electricity and energy prices are high. So, with gradual improvement in the economy, now we will have to move towards when there is a need to reduce the cost of doing business in Pakistan. And it is the job of the private sector to provide jobs and to ensure growth trajectory. But it will take, of course, some time. And on privatization, I think there is a need to do it. It should be done in a transparent manner, because without transparency, then there will be so much question. So,
no doubt about it, Mehtab. Yeah.
There is a need to bring transparency.
All right. Thank you very much, Mehtab Haider, senior journalist. giving his opinion about the transparency in the privatization process. Ani Saab, Dr. Jasim just mentioned foreign direct investment, and he stated that during the past 2 years, we saw surge in the foreign direct investment. There's an up and downs we have seen over the past 2 years, with China leading the index, of course. But is it really that difficult to bring other investors from other countries, from Middle Eastern countries, or let's say European countries, from the United States of America, given the potential in Pakistan in minerals, in water power generation and other sectors?
Well, let's be very frank. The foreign direct investment needs, as Mehtab was saying earlier, that you need a market-oriented government. Though I do disagree that we need a citizen-oriented government, not a market-oriented. A market-oriented government, the extreme of which, as we've seen in the Thatcherite era, does not also really work. The problem with FDI is that FDI goes where the country's own investors go. Now, I have to be very frank. I mean, you pick up the investment of the largest, richest Pakistanis, it is not in Pakistan, right? So how do we expect a foreigner with no ties to a nation, with no backup, no proper citizenry, no understanding of Pakistan, to actually invest in Pakistan? Whether it be minerals, whether it be PIA, whether it is everything. You see, and our track record, second thing, our track record shows that, we muddle up everything. We muddle up, and this is what I think the current government is trying to reform. We have never, ever been, we said, okay, we'll have a privatization policy. Now, really, the world went private. Only 5 countries, probably 5, have a privatization policy. So again, I disagree that the policy does not have to be written, it has to be ridden and walked, right? So a government needs to protect, first and foremost, the interest of its citizens, its nationals, right? Market oriented or not market oriented. I will be very, very upfront about that. And I'm not being very right wing about this, but I think at the end of the day, foreign direct investment flows where it sees local people investing. If we see 20 people from Pakistan, now what is the problem there? I'm not saying Pakistanis don't want to invest in Pakistan, but maybe they've learned over the last 80 years that Pakistanis investing in Pakistan are not treated, guaranteed the same way, right, as people coming from abroad, right? So let's say, take the example of crypto right now. Take the example of anything the government is doing right now. Some Joe Blow of a large corporation, just because they own a $1 trillion company, but they're not a sovereign. The government accords them the best of reception, so they don't allow us into their offices, right? So the thing is that this is a fundamental shift in the way we govern. And I do believe that the Prime Minister's statements and everything and some of his cabinet do reflect that.
But don't you think that the Pakistani investor, they are not diverse enough? I mean, they are investing in some very specific sectors. Take real estate sector, for example. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar sector in Pakistan, and most of the investors in the real estate sector, they are Pakistanis. I mean, huge buildings coming up, big societies. I mean, you criticize them on different grounds, but at the same time, there is an investment available in that sector.
No, but you see, real estate and construction, I wish we don't talk about that, because that is an aberration on investment, right, currently. What we really need to talk about is, why is the Pakistani private sector not getting out of cotton? Why are they not getting out of real estate? Why is industry going down the drain? Even within the cotton value chain, they're not really doing the high-end industrial investment. The answer is the Pakistani investor and the Pakistani corporates are not savvy enough, right? So the thing is, they are not savvy enough because they are risk averse, but they were not always like this, right?
So they are not risk takers?
No, hold on. 60 years ago, I mean, I turned 60 this year. So 60 years ago, when I was born, there were Pakistani investors in almost everything, from making bicycles to making lathe machines to producing tractors to producing this. We now assemble things, right? We don't do anything ourselves. So the thing is, we've somehow understood that, we are better assembling, we're not better producing. Okay, now let me tell you another very interesting fact, because this was what I was going to say earlier. If you look at who's bidding for PIA right now, it's a Pakistani set of Pakistani companies, Fauji Foundation or Fauji Fertilizer or whatever. What makes it so interesting is that how come this particular enterprise has the vision and the corporate sector are the Habibs, the Hussein Dauds, the Dauds, and you name it. They don't have this vision, right? They are happy becoming ministers. They're happy leading us down the path, like as in the previous government, but they are not happy taking on this role. Now, when you ask them, they will say, "Oh no, but that's an army establishment." To hell with you! It's not an army establishment. If somebody has a vision, they believe they can bring in the right talent. They are competing on fair and level ground. So, where are we going with this? The answer to your problem with DFI is the day the Pakistani private sector becomes savvy, starts investing in Pakistan, we will have DFI.
Fine, but what do you think? Why this attitude? Are they not the risk taker, or they are just within their comfort zone?
I think that within the comfort zone, the money has already flown the coup, right? And when the government announces, I mean, believe me, you can pick up Udan Pakistan or Pakistan 2025 or any of these programs. There were like 18 billion of them. All of them, really, there's a lot of slip between the cup and the lip, right? I mean, it's nice intentions, but the problem is it's not just easy to blame the government. I mean, when you really look at it, I'm in the private sector. The private sector is not willing. The risk aversion comes from the fact that the big money has flown. We are the second or third largest investor in real estate in UAE. Can you imagine the amount of money lying there of Pakistanis? So the thing is that they have made their choices. Finis, all these other chemical people, they left Pakistan. They now are running industry in what is Bangladesh. They are running textiles now in what is Sri Lanka. And they actually come back and they want to get gas tariffs corrected. This is a cuddled, subsidized private sector which really needs a real spanking up, on its bottom. I mean, let's be very clear.
Yeah, but on the other hand, they are not even paying their due taxes, and the government has to, ensure.
But they don't earn anything that they can give taxes.
That is fine. Even if whatever they're earning, they are not paying their due tax on their earnings. I mean, that's why the government is bringing,
I think
strict measures.
On that, the previous colleague who said very rightly, I mean, the problem is not these few large industrialists, right? There may be less than 3,000, for example, construction association of partners, right? But the real problem is the retail and the informal sector. The slip happening there is enormous. The lack of them reluctant to include themselves financially, yet able to travel, yet able to have large things, yet able to build huge mosques, huge madrasas. Where is that money coming from?
Of course, of course. Dr. Jazim Saab, recently we have seen joint operations by Federal Board of Revenue and other law enforcement agencies to ensure that the tax evaders would not go scot-free, and there is a recovery of around 170 billion rupees. The question is, now these measures are in place, but on the other hand, the private sector, whatever it is earning in Pakistan, and the tax evasion has become such a stigma, or I don't know what word I should be using here. Why they are not coming forward voluntarily, and why the government has to go that extent to ensure that there is no tax evasion? But again, given the size of the private sector or the retail sector, it is really not possible for any government department or all the government department to ensure that there is 100% taxation.
Well, Shahzad, there is a certain extent to which any government can go for punishing or using certain measures to collect taxes from those who are not voluntarily giving the tax. The question comes like, what is the mindset that derives this thought process that people are evading taxes? Number one, most of the people, they relate the provision of taxes to the quality of the service provision. For example, a number of the people, at least the middle class, they think that the tax they are giving is not invested in a right way for their waste management, for the quality of the healthcare and the quality of the education and the job provision, and so on. So, number of these factors, in addition to certain data-driven measures, can drive this change by having a multi-pronged strategy. For example, people government is doing steps, and people need to understand that the services they are getting, and the infrastructure and the roads and the industries, and that they are being provided and enjoying whatever is the quality right now, at least better than before, is through these taxpayer money that drives the whole economy. In addition, uh, the fact that many retailers they somehow think that the sales tax is not going in the right way, is being addressed through ensuring transparency, providing the reports and the expenditures clearly available to all the medias and the networks. In addition, is a business. Number of the retailers, they still think that giving taxes is a very difficult job, and for that they have to hire some lawyers, and once they declare the tax, they keep on doing, they have to give some money one way or the other. So which is not the case. The government is actually introducing very friendly tax collection strategies, including, if you recall, the FBR introduced that point of sale machines. Also, the Tajir Dost initiative, which was like fixed tariffs for the taxation based on the amount of the size of the shop or the rent they are paying. In addition, now what is being done is using the data triangulation. For example, someone is paying electricity bill of X amount, and traveling to various countries and living in a house and owns certain properties, and the tax declaration is negligible compared to that amount. So such people needs to be made accountable for their contribution for the services they go, and the cost of the businesses that are being provided in this country.
How accurate is to measure the amount of tax one has to pay on the basis of the rent that person or entity or a company is paying, or the kind of lifestyle a person is having. So how accurate this measurement be? Very quickly, and then we have Waheed, he's a businessman. Dr. Safas, you.
Yes, very quickly. I mean, to be very honest, I mean, there is no hard and fast rule, because there are a number of factors that contribute, including, the disasters, including the market ups and downs, a number of things. But yet, uh, the government is working on at least minimum benchmark for those businesses which are above certain threshold, and the threshold will be determined by the finance division in collaboration with the FBR. That, I mean, anyone above this amount, having certain property about this and not paying tax at this amount, X amount I cannot declare right now, but they have to contribute for the tax.
All right, all right, all right. Waheed Saab, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, thank you very much for your time. When we have seen, drop in the inflation, we have seen the interest rate going down, and the government has taken several steps in the right direction, as my guests are saying. The question is, because of these factors, the businesses of people like you must be flourishing, or you should be paying more taxes than the last year, whatever you had paid last year. But now all we have seen or heard are the complaints and the concerns on certain measures the government has taken, especially through the FBR. Why is that? Why the business community is always pointing finger, raising finger at the government? Why they are not coming forward, taking the lead, paying the due taxes or giving back to the society what they must?
Shahzad, I think it's an on-point question that you've risen here, but we have to understand every year when the FBR is going to bring out new targets, and they're going to be very ambitious in those targets, it's going to be mind-boggling for the business community that is not being provided with all the facilities that are supposed to be provided through the government officials, through the government platforms. Uh, Understanding that, there has been a lot of hue and cry of businessmen and FBR. If you see, we have been seeing this mistrust that is still stays between the private community and the government agencies, tax authorities. This mistrust has caused a lot of problems, and for some reason, it doesn't really stop. Every time there's been a little harmony between the government and the private sector, somehow or the other, somebody gets an idea of placing some exorbitant taxes, or some unrealistic scenario is placed between both the parties. So it's been nice that, after the budget was announced, the government officials have reached out to the private community when a lot of complaints were generated. A very high level meeting took place at the Federation of Pakistan with its president and the Minister of State Revenue at the FPCCI office, and I was one of them. And what the good news was, the government is trying to cope up with what the demands of the private community are. That being said, I also want to underline and underscore this part that there has never been a single businessman in the past, at least from 35 years, I can tell you, every year a same taxpayer is being taxed more. The government has to and has to. We have been demanding this. The government has to broaden the tax net and not deepen it. What's been happening in the past 10 years, at least, that we have been witnessing, the government is tax deepening this entire net, not broadening this. So we have to bring in more taxpayers into the net. The few things that have been very, rigid and very, strict that happened in this budget was implementation of 40B, which is, FBR officials sitting in factories of people and, tracing everything. On the other end, a huge problem with Pakistan is, 75% of this economy is cash economy. And somebody in the FBR thought,
For instance, I mean, this could be one of your complaints directed towards the government, but for instance, if the FBR officials are sitting at the premises and asking, questions or checking the books, so if the business community has nothing to hide, why this concern? Although there might be some sort of technical difficulties or, running your ops, but at the same time, when you don't have anything to hide, why concern, why fear?
a person already registered and paying taxes, if you're going to come to their business houses and make this huge hue and cry and spread this harassment system, it's not going to work out. And that's what the government officials also admitted, that we are going to find a harmony out of it, which is a very good outcome. There
FBR official sitting in his own office, sending you the questionnaire, asking question about the supposed or reported tax evasion, or an FBI official sitting at the premises, at your premises, and asking the question. What's the difference? It's just a physical appearance of the same official.
At the end of it, it's just the businessmen are just disappointed because they're taxpayers. We have to understand. We have to respect the limits of all authorities. When it comes to people not paying taxes, then I think
Time and again, your contributions, your services are acknowledged at the highest level, time and again. But it's not about giving the due respect or not giving the due respect. It's all about following the law or ensuring that there is no evasion. If you have nothing to hide, if you are not tax evading, then what's the harm?
I think the past 15 years, government hasn't found a single company that, they have tried to find out. But, it's a good practice, and I think it's feasible. It's good for the time being. But in the long run, this mistrust is going to stretch out. But let's be very frank and let's be very open about it, that we have been through a very bad patch in the last 3 years. Businesses globally have been affected. There's hardly any business in Pakistan. And still, the businessmen of Pakistan are still ready to pay more taxes on what they have paid before. Taking in account all of these measures, the good thing about it is that, stability prevails. The government has been very much able to be stable in the import market. The government has been very much stable in creating more relations. And I think hats off to this government, at least, that they have been trying somehow to bring in the stakeholders, which is a huge piece that was missing in the past government. But this government has actually, achieved that. On the other end, yes, there has been a lot of problems. And there's always, when there's a policy shift, when there's a policy change, there's going to be problems. There's going to be, some friction between both the parties. But that doesn't mean, everything is going to stop. So it's very enterprising at this point, from this point of view, that the
I believe
business.
that your concerns and your grievances would be heard at the highest level and sorted out according to mutual understanding. Thank you very much, Fahd. Waheed, would you like to add something to it, that the government's strict measures against businessmen, and they are complaining, of course?
No, I mean, at the end of the day, the complaint is very justified, because the government just tries to squeeze more out of the same people. And that is really quite, it's disheartening to the people who actually get into the tax net. Now there's a new suggestion that the people actually who are declaring but are actually saying they don't owe any tax. Well, technically there is so much indirect taxation that eventually when you come to it, you've already paid the tax. So what's wrong with that? So I think, let me point out two very clear messages which I'm hearing from Jasim and from Fahd, and I don't want them to be miscommunicated to your audience. I mean, the first one is very, very simple. The FBR is a revenue service of Pakistan, right? It is not the job of FBR or the Secretary FBR to formulate tax policy. Absolutely not.
It's implementing it.
It's implementing it. And basically what the government does is, when the fund comes and says improve your tax collection, they just go to FBR. FBR comes up with these, to be very honest, quite harebrained measures often on increasing taxation. And that is why, despite their large, tall claims, if you look at the tax effort, it is increasing simply because the population of Pakistan is increasing, and yes, the overall size of the GDP is increasing. If you do a measure of that, we are stagnant as percent of GDP. So I think that government needs to take serious cognizance of separating the function of policy making for taxation from that. Second thing, which I think the people confuse. Now, I totally agree with Jasim that the tax needs to be spent closest to where it's collected. Now, that's the biggest problem in Pakistan. The government of Pakistan collects everything is on the shoulders of for collection of FBR. Why is that true? Why are the provincial revenue services not really doing their job? Because fundamentally what people perceive is their tax actually gets collected through all these, and we have something called a tax effort, right? That means rupees spent to collect a rupee. Now imagine a rupee spent to collect a rupee will be easier if your Mohalla committee was taxing you than if the federal government, because there are 4 tiers of government in between that, right? So absolutely wrong policy. Why are FBR supposed to be collecting taxes? If you want, and service delivery, the third point, is not the job of the federal government. Right? Imagine. So, the provinces are messing up the provision of wash services, provincial health services, provision of education, and yet the federal government gets blamed. Why? The federal government's job is higher education, research and all that. I mean, that's pretty much embedded in the constitution right now. Why are you not looking after these things? So I think fundamentally, I'm with all due respect to the people on the panel, I mean, I think they cannot separate the wheat from the chaff. And the chaff is that, if we go round and around and don't correct the federation versus provinces versus, and why don't we have local governments? I think that, this government is paying a lot of attention towards. PPP has often said that, as part of the coalition partner, that this needs to happen. So I think it's time we make it happen. And we bring that tax effort closer to where it is.
Exactly. So it's now going to be the job of the provinces. Ideally.
No, it's not going to be the job of the provinces. Please go and look at the amount of tax collected in the city of Chicago. Please go and look at the city, for example, in, Huntsville County somewhere. I mean, they collect all the taxes. The government they only collects income tax. Income tax is only supposed to account for your, the security, the sort of development, a little bit of your nationality, that's it.
But it cannot be happening without without an ideal devolution of power at the local level.
So
How
ideal devolution of power, I mean, that's really right. I mean, amazingly, it has taken us I don't even remember when the 18th Amendment came around, but I've grown old since it was passed. Now, end of the day, if you think about it, yes, it hasn't really been devolved. Somehow then there was this ministry which was convening. Now we say, what does Ministry of Education do? Well, it still looks after this. But really, the federal government's authority is only in the CAD area. I mean, let's make it very, very clear for all these things.
Right.
And that's where they need to stay.
Of course. Thank you very much, Zafar Durrani sahab, for your time. Dr. Jasim Anwar Mehtab, Fahd, Waheed, and thank you very much, viewers, for watching the program. Good night and Khuda Hafiz.